Hi, I'm Jeff Gonzalez, president of Trident Concepts, and I'm here today with Brownell's Daily Defense to talk to you about gripping errors and our corrective strategies towards fixing them. All right, so again, we're out to the range, we're shooting, we're learning, we're experiencing some problems, and we're trying to work through them. So one of the other main problems that we see has to do with gripping errors. And the first error that we try to work on right away is I'll observe the shooter, and as they're shooting, I'll look to see what type of grip they have. And the most common error that we see, or I should say one of the easiest errors that I see to correct, is when they grip too high. So sometimes we're told, grip that gun as high up as you possibly can. And what I will tell people is that there's always going to be points of diminishing returns. Yes, I would like to be high, but if I'm so high that the angle of my trigger finger is such that it rubs against the frame, no good. All right, so go ahead and change that out. Lower it down so the trigger finger is isolated. Next is a force disparity, which means that I'm squeezing one hand or the other without equal pressure. So one hand might be 100% and the other hand is only 50%. And that disparity is going to cause the gun to shift in whatever direction the hand with the most power is applying. The other one we see a lot of times is hand flexing. Now this is a really hard one to catch, but what happens is as the shooter is about to fire the shot, they start to actually squeeze harder. And as they start to squeeze harder, that's telegraphed all the way down into their trigger finger, and so they start to kind of mash that trigger with a little bit extra power than what they need. One of the other ones that's kind of easy to correct is an improper positioning of the hands. Now, if you have your 5 points of contact, it makes it very difficult for you to actually experience this, but this is also one of the easiest errors to correct, which is looking at the shooter, seeing their grip, realizing that they have an improper grip, and working to correct that. One of the other ones that we typically see with shooters, but it's much harder to diagnose, is when their wrists are super loose. So they're not locking their wrists. And this is part of the grip integrity issue that we talked about, right? We need to make sure that we have those wrists locked nice and tight. So when we see those wrists locked nice and tight, we'll see that recoil impulse in a more controlled manner. When we see the wrist unlocked or loose, a lot of times we'll see that increased recoil arc. And then during rapid fire, we'll see the shooter try to make up for it by squeezing the trigger before the gun has come back onto the target. The last one that we typically see is where we have more of the open heels. The heels aren't pressing in together and not getting that good firm inward positioning or inward pressure. And when that happens, what typically we'll see as far as the shot groups is concerned is we'll typically see the gun recoil a little bit more. So we see a lot of shifting of the grip. So the shooter will be shooting, and during the recoil, we'll see the hand dislodge and them have to re-grip. So if they can really press those heels together and squeeze those pinkies, that locks that grip in, and we typically don't see those shooting errors. All right, so as we're shooting, again, we go through the same diagnostic process. Well, when I feel like I've identified an error, I'll ask the shooter, what are you experiencing? All right, so I'm going to go through a couple of shooting errors here, or actually just one in particular, and we'll work to see if we can get this one corrected. All right, so the first one has to do with a positioning where your shots will go All right, so when I have a shot group on a grip-related issue that's going more in a 6 o'clock position, what typically is happening there? Well, a lot of times we have to isolate that error and make sure that it is not a result of trigger and make sure that it's not a result of sighting issues. And for a sighting issue, that's an easy correction. I just ask the shooter, hey, were you aiming there? What I'll see sometimes is if a shooter had a predisposition to hit in a position that they didn't like, a lot of times they will aim at a different part on the target. They basically are Kentucky windaging and using their error to get the shot inside the target zone. So you don't want to do that. You don't ever want to do that. So the first thing I'll ask is, where were you aiming? Oh, I was aiming a little low. Well, good, because now you're hitting where you're aiming. So we correct that. If we move on and we discover that the shooter was not aiming low, but we still have a low group, now what could have caused that was relevant to the gripping issue? And the most common thing that we'll see has to do with the hand flexing. So as I'm squeezing, as I'm trying to pull the trigger, I'm actually squeezing my grip, which is causing me to actually bring that gun downward before that round leaves the barrel. All right. So what people have to realize is that the actual error is being applied leading up to the shot being fired, but the shooter's actually not able to pick up on that. And this is one of the other reasons why I ask shooters to slow down so that they can start to see these errors occurring. So as they start to milk the grip, they might actually start to see the sight dip before they actually start to really get into the meat of their trigger pull. And if they can see that, a lot of times they can self-correct. Until they can actually see it, it's going to be really hard to correct this error. But most of the time, a grip-related error that's 6 o'clock is going to be because their hands are flexing as they're trying to shoot. All right, take this out to the range, experiment, play with this. What you might discover is that maybe you were doing one of these errors inadvertently and you didn't even know it. You may not have seen the actual error being committed because it was disguised with other errors in there, but now you start to actually pick up on that. Have some fun with this. Go out there and work at trying to improve your precision, your accuracy. If you have any questions, comments, or you want to share your experience, please feel free to do it down below. I'm Jeff Gonzalez. Until then, take care and stay safe.